This is where the fun begins.
Prepare yourself for Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. The evil Empire has struck back with a vengeance, and a new villain, the crime lord Shizor, schemes to replace Darth Vader as the Emperor's second-in-command. With Han Solo held frozen in carbonite by bounty hunter Boba Fett, it's the rebellion's darkest hour. Now, join Jedi warrior Luke Skywalker, hard-charging Chewbacca, and go undercover with heroic pilot Dash Rendar and his booming Outrider. But can Han Solo be freed and Shizor be stopped? Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. Look for the authentic figures and vehicles from Kenner.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Talking EU, where I bring in a person to interview about what got them into Star Wars, especially the expanded universe. And here we have Tad Larkin, or Tad. People will know you for your channel, Manda-LORE. So, hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And so go ahead and just give a brief description about yourself and your channel real quick.
Yeah, sure. I'm Tad Larkin, the lore master of Manda-LORE. I do an EU-exclusive Star Wars lore channel where I try to make it like you're watching an interactive holovid instead of just some guy on YouTube talking about lore. I want to make you feel like you're actually in the universe watching a hologram of like history that's happening, like an actual history documentary. So I like to give that in-universe perspective, and I think that's what sets me apart from some of the other lore channels out there.
Yes, it does, and we'll get into more of that here soon. So I'm so thankful and also honored to have you here for me to interview and what got you exactly into Star Wars, especially the expanded universe. And so the first question I'm going to ask you is, what was your first Star Wars movie?
Oh, my first Star Wars movie was A New Hope. My father wanted to introduce me the correct way, which is 4, 5, and 6. And then at that time, only Episode 1 was out for the prequels. Episode 2 hadn't come out yet. And then I had watched it chronologically up until that point.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, for me, I began when I was probably about 7. And that's when Empire Strikes came out, I believe. And then because A New Hope was already out, my family put the VHS. And yes, I'm sharing my age, basically. And so my grandma and my aunt were like, here, watch this one first before we take you to the drive-ins, because the drive-ins were a thing back then, too. So that was an outdoor movie theater, basically. And I don't know if there's many drive-ins now throughout the United States as much as they were prevalent when I was growing up. And so I did A New Hope on VHS, but and like movie theater wise, it was Empire Strikes Back for me. So yeah, we always have an origin, right? We always have an origin what got us into Star Wars.
Right. You're lucky you actually got to see it in theaters. I never got to see a single Star Wars movie in theaters.
What?
No, I haven't. So I was just starting to get on the boat when Attack of the Clones came up.
Okay.
And so I missed when that was in theaters, and then when Episode 3 came out, I was so gung-ho to see it. All my friends were going to see it, and my dad's like, "You're only 10 years old. This is PG-13." And I'm like, seriously? Seriously?
PG-13. My
God. My father is a great man, and I love him so much, but that's the one thing I will probably resent him for the rest of his life.
It's getting to see it on full screen right there and feeling the sound like rumble through your body and stuff like that. Seeing the Battle of Coruscant on screen, like lifelike when you're oh my God, I feel so bad for you. It's amazing seeing it on screen. It was amazing.
I bet. My mom felt bad for me and gave me the novelization, and me being upset, I was like, whatever. Then going back and reading the novelization, I'm like, this is better than the movie.
Right. I love the novelization so much because it has so much detail and also gives Yoda's perspective, which is amazing towards the end of the book. Yeah. Right. It's like one of the best Star Wars movie novels and one of the best EU novels because it goes into both.
Right. It kind of bridges the gap.
Exactly, exactly. And I have a $4.99 super chat here by Star Wars Mansplain. He's all, "What's up, OG? Hello, and thank you for joining this Talking EU, where I'm interviewing Tad here." So if you guys don't know who Tad is, he has a wonderful YouTube channel. As he said, he gives you the perspectives as if you're watching the history of Star Wars being, televised on a holocron, I guess you could say. The HoloNet. Yeah.
Yeah. HoloNet's more accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And then I do have people come in, and let's go ahead and just say hello. And Corey Cochran, he's been waiting for like a half an hour before we began. And then Johnny Ridden. Anybody coming to the channel brand new, I welcome you guys. Thank you so much for coming in and supporting. That's what our channels are all about. It's giving you Star Wars. You guys, we make this for you. You guys are the reason, not only our love for Star Wars, but you guys are also the reason, because we're sharing it out with you, keeping it at front and center. And then Orange Hat Review, a channel member, awesome. And so I do have my mod in here, Soul Assassin. So thank you so much for dropping in. And Nazo, whoa, Mark Hamilton commercials. And then, of course, this is probably to you right here.
Oh, Suko Igar.
Yeah. So if I don't get to everybody's comment here, I apologize. And we have Rodimus Prime. Tad, there's a guy who responded to your video about Clone Wars doesn't fit, and he basically said, "You're toxic, that's it."
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the famous word people throw out there. "You're toxic because I don't agree with you."
Right. I mean, I just kind of put out a viewpoint. That's for my other channel. I've been, so I started on YouTube as Captain Fordo, and I was making Lego stop motion animation videos. And this was around the time Clone Wars came out, and I was like, hey, why isn't this show? I was kind of, like I said earlier, I wasn't our pre-show talk. I was kind of not happy with the direction the EU was going with Clone Wars and all that happening at that time. So I started making those videos, and of course, you make anything contrary to the status quo, you're automatically toxic. So
yeah, of course. And so going back to the question I asked you, how did A New Hope make you feel when you first watched it?
Well, the first thing I said to my dad when the movie was over, and he remembers this because this is like his favorite story to tell. He's like, I turned to him and I go, "Is there more?"
Yeah. You're like, "I gotta know."
Yeah. While he's sitting here, I'm like, when is the part when he says, "Darth Vader, Luke, I am your father," right?
Yeah.
Not knowing that was in a whole nother movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your favorite OT movie then from the first, of course, 3 that you watched?
Oh, it's Empire Strikes Back.
Okay. That's usually the go-to, like the majority. I'm in the minority with that because mine is Return of the Jedi. So
it's a good one, but I just really love the Imperial Walkers, and just I don't know, I like seeing the bad guys win sometimes, and they're being like an actual threat to the light side, so to speak.
And what is your favorite scene in that movie then?
Oh, the Battle of Hoth.
Okay. And just go ahead and just explain or give us some examples.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Yeah, as you can tell from if you watch my channel, I really like the military history aspect of Star Wars. So I try to, like, when I talk about, I'll do like battle analyses, and I'll talk about like different wars, and I'll analyze them as if you're watching like a history documentary. So I try to do it from the point of, this is, a military history sort of informational thing. So I really like that aspect.
Yeah. Awesome. So I bet you when you seen like the Battle above Coruscant, that was another like, whoa kind of moment.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yes. That right there is my favorite space battle, is Battle above Coruscant. Yeah. So now going on, what is your favorite prequel trilogy movie?
It depends. Sometimes I'm in the mood for Attack of the Clones. Other times I'm in the mood for Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm.
Revenge of the Sith is arguably better than Attack of the Clones, but I love Jango Fett. I love
Yes.
Tamara Morrison, so it's like, I'm just in the mood to watch Tem, so I'll watch
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
So it
Okay.
flip flops. I don't hate Phantom Menace, but
Hmm.
it's just not my favorite.
Yeah, it's the thing that gets the thing stirring,
Yeah.
like the pot stirring, but it doesn't, it provides substance to set up and stuff like that. It gets the pot stirring, but once you get into episode 2, then you really start seeing the threat and what's developing and what Palpatine's doing, and then the clone army being built and used. And yeah, so it gives you
Mhm.
more substance.
Right.
Yeah, so I get it. I get it. And some people are like, we could do without episode 1, but to me, I still like it. I think that it's necessary, but that's just me.
Well, it also helps that when it came out, I was the target audience for Jar Jar Binks. So when I'm like, why does everybody hate Jar Jar so bad? I don't think he's that bad. I think
Yeah,
he's funny.
yeah. I didn't, and
But
my age, I didn't mind. I was like 20 when that came out. I didn't mind it whatsoever. I got what George was trying to do.
right.
Um, yeah, so to me, it didn't bother me as much. But I did see people like get turned off by it, and I understand that too. But it wasn't a big deal to me. So
No.
yeah, so I mean, every movie has some kind of like, I guess you could say, joker or fool that then also gets redeemed into something better.
Hmm.
Yeah, so and I think that Jar Jar is one of them as well. So yeah,
He's the prime
and
example of that, really.
exactly, exactly. And so who is your favorite movie character and why? I think we might know, but go ahead.
Oh, it's Jango Fett.
Yeah. Okay,
But
so let's go ahead and
Django slash Boba. Like, well, Django definitely gets more screen time and dialogue, so I'll have to go
yeah,
Django.
Django. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's like the template for the clones and he's Mandalorian, right?
Right. And that's what
Yeah.
really kind of stirred my. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here in my full armor. Not that I'm actually sitting here, but in my little
We can
avatar.
pretend you are. You can
Yeah,
pretend you
right. I wouldn't be having a full set of Mandalorian armor if it didn't spark or
Yeah.
inspire some sort of thing in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then we have Rodimus saying, Tad, when are you making, or Tad, when make video about Anakin Vader? So when are you going to make a video about Anakin or Vader? You
Well,
have another
next,
request. Here you go.
as we were talking about during the pre-show chat, some videos take a very long time to make, and an Anakin slash Vader video, I've already thought about like how I would do it. I don't feel
Hmm.
like doing it right now. I will eventually get to it. But
Yeah.
if I were to do it, I would definitely split it up into 2 parts. I would
Oh,
do
yeah.
first half Anakin, second half Vader.
Yeah.
And that is also going back to topics where there's a lot of oversaturation of media. That's one of the prime examples of a character who is in a lot of media, and you have to research a lot of stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
not only will that take time to record and edit, but just to research the bulk of the information.
Hmm. That is going to take time. That right there, because Vader basically was like the top villain for. I'm pretty sure he still is in movie history. I
Right.
would take my time and spend like half a year just going through and slowly writing the script and getting everything done,
Hmm.
just to honor. Yeah, he is very saturated in the dark times and rebellion era. So, and I understand that, and leading up to his redemption, his death and redemption. So that one right there, yeah, I would take my time on that.
Right.
Yeah,
Plus, you have to
just
go through all the Marvel comics and the
right.
newspaper strips, and
Well,
it's just like there's so much.
yeah, and then you got to decide, because you're always going to get. We were talking about this behind scene here. You're always going to get one person that says, "What about this? You forgot this point," or
Hmm.
point out something that maybe you didn't know whatsoever, and you're like, "Crap, I could have used that too," kind of deal. So yeah, so there's always going to be that chance, but then that shows how well, the fans that come to our channels knows the lore, and it's a beautiful thing to see when, even though they're like, how come you didn't use this, or there was this, and you're like, oh, I didn't know about that. It just shares how much we know and how much we love the lore, even with our subscribers and stuff. So
Hmm.
it's a
and
beautiful.
and just how big the universe is too.
Exactly. Just imagine though, like, I wonder how George felt after, like, he did all his movies, and then, bring in all these authors in and these creators in to expand on the movies and stuff. All this lore that was created under his guidance and his rules, and, and all that stuff. I wonder how, eventually he felt with all of this.
Well, there's a reason why he wasn't beholden to the EU, because he wasn't going to read all that.
Exactly. It's true that beholden, which they're like, beholden means that it's not canon. And I'm like, not necessarily. It just means that he has hired other people to help take care of keeping everything straight so that he can have the information easily researchable in front of him if he needed to use it, if he wanted to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, when I hear that argument, like, George Lucas never considered the expanded universe canon, you'll
Mhm.
notice that he never utters the word canon in his
No.
entire life. He's
Right. He
in
never
any
did.
quotes that you dig up, whether they're pro or anti the idea of him being, taking the EU any seriously or not, there is no utterance of the word canon in any of them.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
it,
exactly. And that's the point I make, is like, he never knows, he doesn't say, he never used the word canon, and people don't understand the hierarchy of canon either. Because when he says it's not my Star Wars, meaning he didn't produce it as a movie. That's how I see how he says that, because of the hierarchy of canon.
mhm.
Yeah. So, and then we have Soul Assassin right here, says, Tad, do you take responsibility for the attack of the Cawthor people?
No, Tad has canonically not taken part in the Cathar genocide. He was born in many centuries after that.
I love that. These guys were anticipating this interview so much too. So
Oh, good.
everything George Lucas left out in the prequels, Filoni bailed him out with the Clone Wars cartoons. Laugh out loud. So is this a sarcasm thing or an insult? What are you trying to do there?
I don't really understand the statement, but
Yeah, me neither. All right. So, how did you get into the expanded universe? Since we're talking about it now.
well, it all started with the Scholastic Book Fair
Okay.
in elementary school.
Okay.
And I found the Young Boba Fett novels for the junior novels.
All right.
And I guess it all started from there. But I wasn't aware that there was this whole overarching, interconnected universe that, things you read in one novel carried over to another novel or video game or
Okay.
comic.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really, like, I was reading like a couple of these like books and stuff, but I didn't really become aware of the fact that what I was reading was all interconnected until, like, maybe I was like 11 or 12, and
Mm-hmm.
I started getting into the source books too, and I found the New Essential Guide to Chronology, and I'm like, wait a second, I remember reading this in this book, and oh, okay, that's when it all kind of clicked.
Oh, wow.
So
And that
uh,
just opened up your whole world of like, I want to see where this leads to.
it did basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you like, growing up and knowing maybe like, and I'm just probably presuming or whatever, but seeing Star Wars being like all one connective story history or whatever versus maybe other things you may have read, is that one reason why you really got into Star Wars? Is because of expansive history?
Well, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it also when I finally was able to watch Revenge of the Sith, I kind of got into this melancholy of like, wow, there's going to be no more Star Wars after
Yeah.
this. And
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, well, there's all these thousands of different books and comics that I didn't even really know existed. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, bide my time with these.
You're like, yeah, I found treasure trove of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, what was your first game?
My first game was Star Wars Bounty Hunter for the GameCube.
Okay.
Again, going back to why Jango Fett is one of my favorite
Yeah, I
characters.
was like, I seen that coming, but
You'll notice a theme here.
yeah, we're going along a theme. And yeah, so what did you like about that game other than like like Django and all this other stuff?
I just liked running around as Django, catching bad guys, tying people up with the rope, and
Yeah,
just, you know, the story I wasn't like paying too much attention to, but
yeah,
it was a game. It was fun.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And then so your first novel was the Young Boba Fett.
hmm
Okay, so we read that one. And then so your first comic then, what was that?
That was the Star Wars Republic comics. It was the one with Quinlan Voss,
That's
on
nice.
the wheel, which I believe is issue like, 40. It's 40 something. It's in the 40s, I believe.
Was it 41, 42, or something like that? Because we reviewed Quinlan Voss on my coffee chat like last year, like 6 months ago. We were going through a lot of the Republic comics and and reviewing them and stuff for my coffee chat. So we did Quinlan Voss's. I think it's like 42, but I could be wrong as well. Yeah.
hmm It
Yeah.
was around because when the series started, it was just called Star Wars,
Correct.
and then like once they started getting into the Clone Wars, they uh kind of they rebranded it as Star Wars Republic,
Mm-hmm.
and then they went on to Empire and then Rebellion and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get much for myself. I didn't get much into the comics until recently. So mine was all about like the novels, the young readers, and I used to play games, but by the time I became a teenager and a lot of Star Wars games started coming out, I decided to, like be in the band and be on a dance team. And so I kind of gave up games, but I didn't give up Star Wars in general. I just would read it.
hmm
And so I'm not really well versed in the games. And so my friends keep on sending me like games for my computer on GOG. So I get caught up on the game action, and stuff like that. And then at the time too, I really didn't get into the comics either. So it's like I'm rediscovering some of these histories that I already knew about, but didn't really expand on them through reading and visuals. So right now I've been going through a lot of the comics that I've missed, and so it feels like brand new Star Wars for me. Even though we're probably not going to get any more of the expanded universe as we know it now. Are
Right.
we? Yeah. So it's been such a great pleasure to have some rediscoveries on some of the lore that maybe I didn't brush up on as much as I should have growing up as a fan. So it's fun. It's
Well,
fun.
we all discover things at our own pace.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
There are things that I'm still like in our pre-show chat we were talking about. There are still things that people are like, "Oh, you didn't cover this," and I'm like, "I've
Mhm.
never heard of that." And then I
Yes.
find whatever comic or novel or West End game source book it was in, and then I
Yeah.
read it, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I never knew this. This is
Yes.
awesome." Like I'm still finding stories that I didn't know existed.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, we think that we know a lot, but then we're always surprised with what we don't know, and it's a welcomed pleasure, I guess you can say, because you're like, oh, something new I can look into.
Right?
And it's fun.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then so do you have a favorite show? Like the shows that came out under George Lucas, do you have a favorite show?
Oh, the '03 Clone Wars series.
Okay, all right.
That's evident.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'm like, some people may not know. I know from watching your channel and your big old video, 2-part video about how TCW doesn't fit in what is called Legends now.
Yeah.
So that's apparent to me, but I just had to ask. And so go ahead and give some points on what you loved about Clone Wars '03.
Well, it came out around the time that the big hype train for Revenge of the Sith was. So it was basically just a hype fest for, hey, Revenge of the Sith is coming out. But it was just, and like I grew up with Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack, so
Yeah,
everything that Gendy Tartakovsky did was just brilliant.
yeah,
So just I'm like, oh, it's Star Wars Samurai Jack. This is awesome. You know,
Yeah.
10-year-old me was like, this is amazing. Or 9 at
Mhm.
the time, I guess. But
Yeah. I think it was brilliant how Tartakovsky basically gave us that wonderful, like those little wonderful bits of Clone Wars. And when you watch it, you could, like, there's some of them don't even have anybody speaking, but you understand what's going on, the depth of the art and the story as you watch. I think it's phenomenal as how he did that and how you could still follow along.
oh, he's the master of telling story through action, through character action, and not dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from his time working on Samurai Jack, because being a very anime inspired show, it's the character is doing all this action. Like Samurai Jack barely talks,
Hmm. Yeah.
but um, he conveys the story through the actions of the characters and what's going on. And the characters don't need to speak because their actions do all the storytelling for them.
Correct. And I may not have grown up like with Samurai Jack and stuff, but I knew of it and stuff. So when I got to see the Clone Wars '03, that's what I felt. That's how I fell in love with it. Not being familiar with Samurai Jack too much, I loved the visual storytelling that he did, and it just hooked me. And then it ending with the battle above Coruscant too, like leading into that was like, whoa, I like that. Having an EU show, you know, go into the movies and then going through the movies and listening to references that reference back to the EU, characters that were part of the EU, all of that intertwining to create a big universe
Mm-hmm.
was so amazing.
Yeah, Force Unleashed. I know Force Unleashed. I don't know why I said that. Revenge of the Sith is completely different.
I know, like all the way to, yeah, later on.
Has a surprising amount of expanded universe references in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It does. And then, so who is your favorite? Now, this is going to probably be difficult for you. Maybe not. Maybe you'll surprise people. Maybe not. Maybe you already said it. But who is your favorite EU character and why?
Well, in my top 10 video, I explained that Captain Fordo was one of my favorites, just basically because of nostalgia, just unashamed, unabashed nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I would need a while to actually sit and think, because every time I do research for a video and I go back and I read a book or listen to an audiobook or read a comic, I end up finding characters that I'm like, oh, I really like this character. This is the best character. So
You're just like, I just like it all.
it really depends on what I'm reading at the time.
Yeah. Soul Assassin says, Fordo.
And as I explained, Fordo isn't much of a character because he doesn't talk much, B, he doesn't really have much of a story or backstory, and C, he's depicted in no other media but that show.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But there's a lot of depth in him anyways. Like, and like I wish like some of those characters that were in Clone Wars '03 were carried on. And so, we can only wish now, but I can tell like how you like caught on to him and how you developed, a liking for him. So very like phenomenal character just in a short time. And that's like how Boba Fett was with George Lucas in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He was this back character that did the deed that he needed to do for the Empire, bounty hunting, and everybody caught on to him as well.
Oh yeah, it's the rule of cool. As you know, you can be in the movie for 5 minutes, not say a thing, and then people will love the character because it just looks cool. And that's what Boba Fett was. He came, he said 3 lines, he took Han Solo and he left. And that was Boba Fett. And everybody was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That is the best character.
Yeah.
And then you try to analyze it and you're like, why? Why?
Why? Yeah. Even though he got knocked into the Sarlacc after the fact, and by some foolish turn of Han, with him being, mostly blind from carbonite freezing. But George basically was like, the fans like him, okay, so he still lives. So we're like, thank you.
Well, I read that he originally planned 9 movies, and Boba Fett was going to be a major antagonist in a few of them before the final showdown with Vader and Luke.
Uh-huh.
And then obviously they compressed it into just 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what George has said in the past of like, there's only originally 6. That's what it begins with Anakin, ends with Anakin, basically, and his life between,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes on to say there was supposed to be prequels, in the middle, and then the sequel. The father, the kids, and the grandkids, and so how he changed his mind on everything all the time.
Oh yeah, George Lucas isn't consistent, and
No,
you can just tell in his filmmaking style too. He has
yeah.
trouble telling consistent multi-part stories. That's why like they're not huge inconsistencies, but like with the prequels and the original trilogy, it's like, oh okay, well, Obi-Wan said Yoda was his master. Who's this Qui-Gon dude? And
Yeah.
little things like that, or it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then obviously all the old special editions and the re-releases that happen all the time, and even like after he sold the movie, he got one more edit in with the infamous McClunky scene. In the was it a Blu-ray re-release, or was it a Disney Plus exclusive thing?
I don't recall which one it was. To me, it was like a Disney, exclusive kind of thing. That's what I
No,
thought.
I think it was the 4K
Was it?
re-release. Yeah.
Okay. I just knew it happened. I just didn't know which, how, like where, where exactly what, where, like what disc or whatever it was on, Blu-ray or whatever. Yeah. So that was very interesting when that came about. And yeah, so, but we know George, and that's the thing, is he was never consistent, but his actions spoke louder than words. So even when he said like, oh, it's a parallel universe, him and his company didn't treat the EU as a parallel universe. He treated it as part of the same timeline as the movies. So,
Right.
yeah. So I would go with his actions rather than words.
And he worked on The Force Unleashed. He worked with Andy Tartakovsky on Clone Wars. Not directly, but they would. I watched the I have the commentary because I've got the DVDs, which I don't
Yeah.
even think you can get anymore.
No,
But
you
he explains how like he'd have phone calls with George, and he'd go out to lunch with George, and George would explain like what he wanted out of the series, because George would actually sit and watch it with his son Matt, not Matt, who was the one that played the Jedi kid that gets killed in front of Bail Organa in Revenge of the Sith.
I just can't think of his name, but I know exactly because I see it in my mind's eye too. I just don't remember his name.
He's one of his younger sons, but he'd watch it with him.
Jet.
And, Jet Lucas. Thank you, Iron Inquisitor. Oh, hey, Iron Inquisitor. He's one of my regulars.
Yes, he is too with me. And Jet Lucas, yes. Yes, thank you. I'm like, I couldn't think of his name, but I see his face. I see him acting it and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. I could see him too. But I'm trying to think. He was involved. Oh, yeah, he was involved with Shadows of the Empire. He had some minor involvement with Dark Empire, basically saying, "Don't bring Vader back. That's stupid. But if you could bring Palpatine back, go for it."
Right.
And he just had input on tons of other little things, but
yeah, exactly. And then like when you get to New Jedi Order, he's like, I like the plot here, but you can't make them like Sith kind of deal when it comes to the Vong, and I don't want Anakin in there, or let's kill him because I'm coming up, the grandfather's name is Anakin, and I don't want 2 Anakins going on at the same time, which was kind of like, okay, well, I think people can distinguish between the two, but I guess so that's the course of like the Solo kids and who's surviving and who goes dark and stuff. So yeah,
George was kind of I think it sounds mean, but I think he anticipated his audience being dumber than we actually are. So he's like, oh, I don't want two Anakins, that'll confuse people, or oh, let's rename Korriban because it kind of sounds too much like Coruscant, stuff like that.
Exactly. And it's like people already were acclimated to all
It's
of
like,
that and knew
yeah,
all of that already because of your expanded universe. We had no trouble correlating between the two because Korriban is a planet where Coruscant is like a one city type world planet. So we can distinguish between the two.
right. And they don't even start with the same letter.
Exactly. Korriban forever. Yes, I agree. Yes, and Junior Jedi Knights mixed them up a few times, probably just autocorrect, but it made it past editing. So Junior Jedi Knights mixed what up?
Coruscant and Korriban?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I know that like sometimes with the spelling or especially with the pronunciations, like how many times have we heard Coruscant being misspoken about until it actually came into the PT and was actually shared with us. We have Coruscant, and so many different pronunciations like that until we had the movies say it to us. So, yeah.
I actually get a lot of comments on my videos being like, "Oh, you
Ooh.
mispronounced that," and I let it slide for the most part. But
Mhm.
like when we actually have pronunciation guides, like for any Mondoa words that I use, we have pronunciation guides in the Republic Commando books. So
Mhm.
when somebody's like, "It's Sukui-gar, not Sukoi-gar," I look through
Yeah.
the book and I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right."
Yeah.
Or, "Oh no, you're wrong. That's rubbish. I have it right here."
Yeah, I know. It's
Oh, sorry.
no, I'd say, like all the language that was produced through Star Wars, like even like some of the basic, I guess you could say the basic, and how, like different species of word pronunciations come through and stuff. It's difficult to figure out. I've butchered all kinds of names and I still do anyways today. So
hmm
yeah.
My friend and I actually have a long-standing argument that is still not resolved to this day, where he believes it's pronounced Felucia, and I believe it's pronounced Felucia, and are given no guide onto what the actual pronunciation of the name is. He goes off on Force Unleashed because that's how Galen Merrick pronounces it.
Hmm.
I go off on Star Wars Battlefront 2 when you hover over the planets, both the Republic, CIS, and Imperial and Rebel narrators for the
Yeah.
campaign will call out Felucia.
Lucia. Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up playing that game as well with Bounty Hunter, and I was like, well, I've always heard it Felucia, so Felucia.
Yeah. Okay, chat. What do you think it is? Felucia or Felucia? I've heard it both ways, and I do pronounce it both ways. So I'm like, screw it. It's said both ways in the lore. It's just gonna be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Now speaking of like different planets and stuff and going into different species, do you have a favorite species?
Oh, favorite species?
I hardly ask anybody this, but do you so I'm like, I'm gonna ask Tad who his favorite species.
Well, the Kifar are cool because they have the psychometry ability.
Yeah.
Um, they can touch objects, and if you're force sensitive, it's a lot more clear. But they can get
Right.
like a sense of like memories from the object. You also have the Iktachi, which are telepathic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard. You've got the Ithorians that have four throats and can just blow things up sonically.
Yeah. It's so hard to decide because it's so vast, right?
It is, and each species has their own like different like traits that
Yeah.
make them cool and unique. Like the Trandoshans, you can lop off a Trandoshan's legs and he'll grow them back.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I Zabraks are very pain resistant. Twi'leks are just hot.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna ask you, who's your famous, or who do you like out of like female, like oriented species like Twi'leks and
Oh, Twi'leks are the prettiest. Those are the.
okay.
There's a
Well,
reason why the
yeah,
men are ugly.
I think a lot of guys like Celtrans and Twi'leks and stuff like that are the ones that, most guys like, migrate to
Mhm.
because of how they look. They're aesthetically pleasing. Yeah.
Well, the fantasy of having a Zeltron girlfriend is that she actually wants you because all,
Yeah.
all Zeltron are very
Very,
frisky. So
yeah, very promiscuous. You got to be Kate Skywalker, the one, because he's got, Delilah Blue, who pretends like she doesn't want to be involved. But once he's like kidnapped and he's in trouble and stuff, she kind of like commits to him
Mhm.
and gets jealous because, and stuff like that. So, yeah, you got to have someone, I guess you got to be Kate Skywalker to really tame a Zeltron.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought I'd go there because a lot of guys, that's the thing is that's what I don't care. I don't mind that kind of talk either. So, so,
Oh, and Wookiees are just badass.
oh yeah, Wookiees are. They are. And
They
then
live
so,
to be like 500, and they can rip your arm off.
yeah, yeah. And they're also like their life debt, their commitment is phenomenal, as we
Mhm.
see between Han and Chewbacca.
Mhm.
Yep, exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah. So it's I like I said, it's a hard decision, and stuff. I know that. I understand because each species is uniquely different. So I'm gonna go another way. What is your favorite Force society? Other than Jedi or Sith?
Ooh. Well, the Altesian sect is pretty cool because
Okay.
they're basically like the chill version of Jedi.
Yeah.
The Jensari are cool because they have
Mhm.
armor. But
Yeah.
I gotta go with the Imperial Knights.
Ooh, okay. And why?
Because they're not really like beholden to either quote unquote side of the Force. They just serve the Emperor, and they don't even serve the seat. Or no, they don't even serve like the person who is the Emperor or Empress. They serve the position.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like the Praetorian Guard of ancient Rome, where if you're a sucky emperor, they'll, you know, boot you out and put somebody on the throne that can actually do a good job.
Exactly. I almost spit out my water when you said that because I know exactly what you're talking about too. They're like,
Right.
you're not good enough. Off with their head.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Oh my god. So I'm gonna come on to a quiz here. So I
Okay.
like to do like fun little quiz just to kind of, we're all EU fans and we have our own knowledge and stuff like that. And usually I base it upon like your favorite character. So I did base it off of Fordo. So
Oh, cool.
yeah. So what was Captain Fordo's arc number?
77.
Correct. Yeah. So usually I start off easy and I get a little harder as we go. At least I think I do, depending on
Okay.
the. Yeah. So it's like, that should be kind of easy. But if he doesn't know, I'll be like, what the hell? What's going on here? No. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the first one. I just only have two. I might come up with something here pretty soon. Another one, a third one.
Okay.
So, what encouraged you to create a YouTube channel based upon Star Wars Expanded Universe? So I know you kind of introduced that a little bit as we began. So just go ahead and share with the audience a little more.
So, like in 2014, when I was following some lore channels, and this was back when the Expanded Universe was the whole not canon thing anymore. And then I didn't like how a lot of the bigger YouTubers would kind of mix both canon and legends.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I want just one dedicated expanded universe only channel. And I couldn't really find that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make one. So I
Mm-hmm.
did. And the style is heavily inspired off of the Old Republic. If you go the MMO, if you go on the
Yeah.
website, especially back when the MMO was being developed, which was when I was in high school, I followed the development of that game because the trailers looked cool.
Yeah.
They had a little section of the website called Timeline, and they'd have Lance Henriksen, the guy who played Bishop in Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
He would narrate a history of the galaxy sort of thing up until the point of the game. And so he was this Jedi Master named Nosteral, and he was this historian, and he basically had like a holo projector documentary in front of you.
Mhm.
And I really liked that, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I want to make a YouTube channel, and I want to have it kind of be like this, where it feels like you're watching a holo documentary, and there's an actual in-universe character presenting the lore to you.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then at the time, I was in the middle of making my own Mandalorian armor because I really wanted to join the Mandalorian Mercs Costume Club.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, I could actually work this into that. So I came up with Tad Larkin, who was actually an RPG character I made for a Warhammer RPG with my friends.
Nice.
And I was like, well, this name sounds really Star Warsy, and I like it. So I'm like, okay, that'll be my Mandalorian's name. What do I call my channel? Now I have a friend. He goes by Somraptor on YouTube, but on Facebook he manages a meme page called the Manda-LORE. So I kind of took inspiration from his name. I'm like, okay, what if I call my lore channel the Manda-LORE? And I was like, you know what? Just shorten it to Manda-LORE.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Awesome. You know what? And so I loved like the design of your channel and like how you broadcast it. Where did you find like all of that, the tools to use, like how it looks like a HoloNet broadcast? I'm curious.
Well, I got really lucky, and
Okay.
one of my friends who's in radio, and he does like a lot of podcast stuff and digital art stuff, and he's actually going on to try to create his own TV show for a major network, but I'm not going to say what it is in case it doesn't go through.
That's fine.
But he got a copy of Adobe Premiere, and he just had an extra copy lying around. He said, hey, do you want this? And I'm like, yes, of course I do.
Wow. Okay.
And that has a lot of the tools I need to like layer things properly. And I make some of the effects in like Photoshop or paint.net and GIMP, because different products do different things, have different tools that I like better than the other. So I'll use those to kind of create some of like the transparent, holocrony sort of effects. And the program allows me to layer them in a way that looks good.
Okay, and then you just put it into a video format afterward. So like almost like a PowerPoint thing where it goes back, it had like premieres and plays through.
Oh, kind of. It's just a video editing software. I'll just export it to a whatever file.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Because I'm an artist, as you could tell when we were talking. I have my my Asajj Ventress behind, and a lot of my channel members and people who come in for my to my YouTube has seen that painting before. And so I sometimes when I'm getting ready to make prints, I'll go ahead and use my Adobe or my software I have for editing and stuff. And I also do digital art, so I draw digitally and stuff too. So I'm like curious because I'm like, how can I, like, for some of my stuff that I want to do, how can I make it look like a broadcast, or how can I give it more of a Star Wars feel using different suites like that? So I love that you discovered that. And I'm like sitting here thinking, what the hell? I didn't even think about using that stuff. I'm like, wow, it's just right there in front of my fingertips.
Right. I find it helpful to just go into YouTube sometimes and just type in, how do I make something look like a holocron in X program?
Yeah.
Or a hologram.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about doing that.
Yeah, that's how I learned how to do a lot of the stuff. They're like, oh, if you go into GIMP, there's this thing where you can like put like projector lines on things and it looks really great. And I'm like, oh, what? Okay, cool. GIMP is free. That's awesome.
Yes, score. And I adore your channel. I adore your platform and what you do and making it different, and I think that's what brings a lot of people to your channel is that you give us and your viewers, your followers, your members, that feel of, watching a broadcast
Hmm.
in a galaxy far, far away.
Well, thank you. Like
Yeah.
I try to be different, and I don't want to like poo poo on any of the other lore YouTubers because they're great in their own ways. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to be different, set myself apart from the rest.
Yeah, and I think we all try to do our own unique stuff. Like my platform right now is basically doing the interviews like I'm doing with you. I have coffee chat every Thursday morning where we sit down and talk about different lore. So I sit down with my chat and we have a conversation about Star Wars lore, whatever topic that is of the week or whatever. And then I also have what is Cringe Factor, where we look into what's going on in Star Wars here and now, and we discuss that and the development of Star Wars and stuff like that. So I get more into like one-on-one basis with a lot of people that come to watch my channel.
Oh, that's
So,
cool.
yeah, so coffee chat it's called, for Thursday morning. Sit down, have a cup of coffee, let's talk, let's nerd out about Star Wars.
Right. That's
Sometimes
really
fun
cool.
talking. Yeah, so I just love, like I said, I just love like the creativity as an artist. One thing I'm going to start doing here coming late fall is I'm going to do some reviews on Star Wars concept art and novel art, since I'm an artist and I have my degree in art. And so I'm going to go over and look at, the art, the novel covers, and what other countries have different versions of that, and go over like, how well it's done, and, and all this other stuff. Just talk nerdy art, Star Wars stuff. So,
Oh,
yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah. So I'm like, no one does that. And I love art, so might as well.
Yeah, go on ahead.
Yeah, the concept art, Ralph McQuarrie, and all those that had contributed throughout the years for Star Wars. Yeah.
There's some pretty wild Ralph McQuarrie concept art. Like you see stormtroopers with lightsabers and shields.
Yes.
Of course, the Boba Fett concept art where he's all white. Back when he was supposed to just be a Imperial trooper.
Yes, exactly. And I can't wait to even talk about that, because the concept will get into a little bit more of what George was thinking at the time, or what they were trying to go with approach, and how that also changed to how we see them in the movies. So, the evolution of the concept art and what we have today too is another interesting topic that I like. So, yeah. So, moving on, what is your favorite Star Wars era?
Oh, I was asked this before, and I don't remember my answer.
Just go off the top of the head, whatever comes out naturally, because we have the Old Republic, we have pre-Old Republic, we have the prequel trilogy era, then we go into the Dark Times, and then the Rebellion, or the OT, or classical era, whatever you want to call that, New Republic, New Jedi Order, and into Legacy.
So growing up in the prequel era, I obviously really love the prequel era, both like the pre-Phantom Menace stuff and the post-Phantom Menace stuff. I have been finding myself recently, like in the past 5 years, getting into the Legacy era.
Okay.
And I've reread those comics about like 3 times already.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal art. Like I said, okay, I'm gonna go back to the art thing. Jen and her penciling and stuff, and the colorist stuff. Oh my God. It's just like, it's one of the best. And of course she did, Old Republic as well. Yeah.
Those comics are great too. I do like Zane Carrick and his whole crew.
Yeah.
And you think I would like the Mandalorian Wars better, but there's just something about the Republic comics that I just keep going back to.
Yeah. Like one Republic one I liked, really, really liked, and it also goes into the Empire Rebellion era, is Battle of Jabim.
Yeah.
And then with the one where Luke goes back, what's it called again? Our fathers, our something,
Sins of Our Fathers.
Something like that. Yeah. So, and I've always wanted to, offer, like, take those comics and like from Jabim, and then take Luke's version, like the extended, like it's like a sequel to that, and then just offer or put them together, because you could read them together and skip the whole time frame and still understand what had happened during those times. So very well done.
Yeah.
So with the Legacy era, what keeps you coming back to it?
Well, because it takes place so far from everything. Like all of the characters that are in the movies are long dead and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just seeing like what the content creators and authors are figuring the universe is going to look like in 130 odd years.
Yeah.
And it's dark and it's gritty, and the Sith are back, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, I just really like it, and I like the Imperial Knights. The
Mm-hmm.
the Jedi Order is kind of gone again, but that's the biggest cliche that happens in all the eras.
Right. That and somehow like some kind of empire's back as well.
Well,
You even look at the Fel Empire.
the Fel Empire is interesting
Yeah.
because it's still an authoritarian regime, but it's a bit more benevolent than compared to Palpatine's empire,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
think
run by the descendants of Jaina and Jagged.
yeah, I was going to get to that too, and I kind of blurred out a little bit, but you could
Oh,
tell
sorry.
the difference between, because Jaina, and her influence by her parents and her uncle versus like Jag's, influence from the Chiss and his family. So
Mhm.
you can kind of see a blend of both sides in that, and how she recreated, the true the stormtroopers and stuff, and and I guess you could say another sect of the Jedi Order, if you want to call it that. And that what they kind of like hinted around in the Legacy era. I think it's Fate of the Jedi on her, as she was, engaged to Jagged Fell. How he was like, why don't you just come to the Empire side and just go ahead and make, your own, you know, order, offshoot of, your uncles and stuff like that. So there's a little hints of that we never really got to see in development.
Some creative foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And what do you think about the one Sith?
Um, it seemed like the natural evolution
Mm-hmm.
of the Sith, kind of,
Yeah.
because you had the Old Republic era where the Sith were Legion. You had then it goes into the Rule of Two,
Mm-hmm.
and just the whole domino effect, not domino effect, but like stacking effect of
Mm-hmm.
uh, the apprentice. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Surpasses the master, then kills
Yeah.
the master and becomes the master. Then he finds an apprentice or she, and that apprentice surpasses him or her and becomes the new
Mm-hmm.
master, and so on and so forth. At some point, it has to stop where the Sith are powerful enough to be like, well, it's just me. I'm the Sith forever. I am perpetual. And that's what Crate tried to do. Palpatine kind of tried to do that to an extent. He had no intent on dying, and that's why he had all those clones and
Mm-hmm.
doing his essence transfer and all that. But Crate tried to take it a step further, and it's just like, no, I'm just not going to die. The
Mm-hmm.
Sith is mine forever.
Yeah.
So that seems like the natural evolution of it.
Yeah. And the Crate or Sherrod, he went through almost this basically the same torture as Jason Solo.
Mm-hmm.
So going into some kind of like what if scenarios, do you think that Jason Solo would have, like, if he would have stayed alive, do you think he would have changed the face of the Sith, because he kind of went through the same kind of torture and stuff that Sherrod Het did?
Well, what we know from Legacy of the Force, and
Hmm.
I think it's touched on a little bit in Fate of the Jedi,
Yeah.
um, the Lumaya's what she's trying to do. Lumaya I see as the continuation of Palpatine's Sith, which is
Yeah.
the Bay Knight Sith. Um,
Hmm.
and I feel Crate is kind of taking those principles and trying to do his own thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Crate and Lumaya both interact with Vergere, and so they almost kind of have like the same quote unquote teacher. Um,
Hmm.
but to me it's very clear that they're two separate, distinct sects. Where Jason was kind of the end of the Bay Knight Sith,
Hmm.
and Crate was the beginning of the one Sith, which
Right.
we know how that turned out.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have Darth Talon, which is a Twi'lek there.
Uh-huh.
So one of some of the guys' favorite, Sith, female Sith.
I can't imagine why.
I know, right? So with Darth Bane, what'd you think about that with Darth Bane and how he created the rule of two? And basically, we have the evolution starting there because he's seen how the Sith were destroying each other for power
Hmm.
and creating the rule of two. So what do you think about that storyline? Because it all leads up to Palpatine, and then after Palpatine, it all leads up to Crate.
It's interesting that Drew Karpyshyn kind of created this uh, basically a masterpiece for what was originally supposed to be a retcon because, again, George Lucas isn't consistent, as we've discussed before,
Yes.
with his throwaway lines where Obi-Wan says that for over 1,000 generations, the Jedi have been the guardians of the Old Republic, so on and so forth, which we know a generation is about 25 years, so 1,000 generations is 25,000 years. That's why the Republic's 25,000 years old.
Yeah.
But then C.O. Bibble in Attack of the Clones, he says there hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic, where that's incorrect.
Right.
Just because of Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic 2, SWOTOR, and all the stuff in between.
Right.
So they created the new Sith Wars basically to explain that, okay, the Old Republic basically kind of falls and then reforms, and then that way both of these throwaway lines are technically correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anybody here has ever read the Bane novels, but they're fantastic.
Yes, they are.
So, goes back around to my main point. It's interesting that, such a great story was created for a retcon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a retcon, and it was successful because of how well it was. The fans loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because by seeing with, and I'm just gonna go there right now, with the supposed retcon of Boba Fett or the Fett family in TCW.
Oh God, we're gonna go here.
I'm just saying, I'm comparing and contrasting with Bane and that retcon versus what they try to do with the Fets. But then again, once we get into the Legacy era, like the early books before we get into the comics and stuff, they started course correcting it again to the Fets being Mandalorian. So, they course corrected on that. But I'm just showing how, how different those scenarios happen. And I guess you could say it's putting a creator up on a pedestal more than liking, paying attention to the lore. And I'm talking about Filoni, versus George, because people will say, yeah, George says crazy shit and he retcons and his company goes and corrects it. But when it comes to that Filoni crap, they put him on a pedestal like everything he says goes.
Right. I tend not to try to talk about this stuff because I'm honestly just tired of it. I even say at the end of, I think, my last video on Captain Fordo, where I talk about the last of the TCW doesn't fit in EU videos. I say that I'm just kind of done talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I presented what I feel. If you don't feel that way, that's fine. We can live together. This is planet Earth.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm done talking about
opinion. Yeah, and I agree. I'm not trying to
no.
Soul Assassin says open old wounds, OG.
But I will say there's retconning for the better, and then there's retconning nonsensically.
Exactly, and that's what I was getting at too, is because and using that as a compare and contrast type thing, is that usually retcons are supposed to be good for the lore, right?
Yeah.
And when it's not, that's when the company has to really kind of stir the boat back into a proper direction, which they did with the Feds. They did. And I'm thankful for that. I think we all have wounds from that.
And this is an unpopular opinion, which, no surprise, I'm just an unpopular opinion generator, I guess. But, I feel like, even if it contradicts something that George Lucas said, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like retconning things that people liked with things that aren't as good, which I guess is subjective. Um,
Yeah.
I don't like that. Like,
Yeah.
the Mandalorians being pacifist. I don't care if that was George Lucas's idea. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So let's move on from that. But
Right.
talking about, basically Mandalorians and stuff, what do you think about the relationship between the clones and the Jedi? So switching gears now.
Well, I'm more unpopular opinions because Karen and Travis is pretty unpopular in the Star Wars
I
community.
love her. I love her. But go
I
on.
do I do too, but I'm of her mind where the clones are a slave army and the
Hmm.
Jedi are just so it's weird. So like the Jedi, you can either see them as just so self-righteous and concerned about you know preserving the republic that they just kind of look the other way at this obvious slave army.
Hmm.
And then you also have to figure that Sidious is creating with the Clone Wars. Sidious is creating the situation where kind of like a phishing email where you have the sense of urgency and that you have to act now, even if you end up shooting yourself in the foot.
Hmm.
It's like, if you ever gotten a phishing email, it's like, oh, we've got your internet history and we're going to release it to your family if you don't click this link right now and stuff like that. That's basically what the separatist crisis was.
Hmm. I agree.
So you could look at it like that, like the Jedi didn't really have a choice. They kind of had to take the slave army, but it's like at the same time, it's unethical. They could have at least, got the war to a point and like protested it. And then you even have the Jedi who in the early Clone Wars of the Republic comics, where they kind of I'm referencing the Mace Windu one where he goes to Sora Bulg's house basically,
Yeah.
and he meets with the Jedi that are protesting, being generals in the war because Jedi aren't really, you know, they're peacekeepers, they're not warriors and generals. First of all, second of all, they're leading a literal army of flesh slaves, droid things.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's a weird relationship with odd circumstances, but um, two wrongs don't make a right. Some atrocities don't excuse others.
Correct. And I think that's what made the Clone Wars in general really sad is that Palpatine knew exactly what he was doing. And he knew because, the Sith were atoning for 1,000 years basically. And so during that time frame, they were studying the mechanics of the Jedi.
Right.
While the Jedi were just training for the Sith for like that they knew 1,000 years ago. So they weren't progressing. The Sith were progressing. So Sidious knew that the Jedi would jump and help lead this army to fight for freedom.
Hmm.
And so he knew their weaknesses and he used it against them.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's was the brilliance of Palpatine in himself is that he was playing both sides of the war so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all part of the Sith master plan.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
Yeah, Revenge of the Sith. So what sparked your interest in the Mandalorian culture? So we may know a little bit now in our conversation, but go ahead and share what
So
really sparked your interest.
on the Xbox version of the Republic Commando game, you used to have during the loading screens, you used to have little quotes from Wallen Vow and Cal Skirata and like Tonwi or not Tonwi Kosai. And I'm like, who the hell are these characters? And back in 2007, Wikipedia was starting up, and and I was like, oh, okay. Apparently, there are Republic Commando books.
Yeah.
And so I started reading the books, and I'm like, oh my god, these are awesome. And
Hmm.
just learning about the Mandalorians, like that we get like a little bit of Mandalorian lore, and then in Hard Contact, and then in the second book, 000, which I think there were only 3 books out at the time when I started reading them. Order 66 hadn't come out yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, So 000 just goes full head on, smack you in the face with Mandalorian lore.
Yeah.
And just learning about the lore through Cal Scarata and Wallen Vow's interactions just
Hmm.
attracted me to the Mandalorians. Like, here's a whole planet of Boba Fett's, and not only are they cool warriors, but they can do what they want. They can, they can own a bar if they want to on the
Hmm.
side. They can farm if they want to.
Hmm.
Um, it's like this. Well, not really like a utopia, but it's this ideal society where there isn't big government and people just leave you the hell alone to do what you want.
Yeah, as long as you follow the code, basically,
Right.
and you respond to the Mandalore when when things need to be dealt with.
Hmm.
Basically, you lived your life whether you lived on Mandalore or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's some Mandalorians that have never even set foot on Mandalore, but they're
Hmm.
still, gung ho, true blue Mandalorians.
Hmm. Exactly. So with that, because we know that Mandalorians evolved from the Tong, and
Right.
then over time, came into adoption. So the Mandalorian culture basically was not a set species after the Tong died away. It was more or less if you were adopted in, you were part of the family, and then of course you were raised. There was basically this is the culture that really didn't set a binary standard, like how today's society they want like pronouns and binary and all these other different rules with gender and stuff. But when you look at the Mandalorian culture, like we have them, Bobby Weir means grandmother and grandfather, so the women were expected to be as fierce and as strong as the men, which I thought was very interesting with that culture because they adopted other species, and other species didn't have the same type of genders, I guess you
Uh-huh.
could say, as humans. And
Right.
so I guess, Karen Travis was ahead of her time when, when she created this lore and this culture of Mandalorians.
That's what always kind of bugged me when uh, people don't claim it often, but there are people that will claim like the EU wasn't, like friendly to like some of the stuff today. When you look back on it, the expanded universe is incredibly diverse. It's incredibly LGBTQ friendly,
Right.
and it's there's so many like strong female, like actually well written strong female
Right.
characters
Yes.
that you don't really actually have that excuse, and that's why
Yeah.
I don't have it thrown around a lot, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Um,
And it wasn't in your face. So it wasn't done to compromise the story. Like Baveen and his husband is such a great story in itself.
mhm.
And his interaction with, Boba Fett and all stuff. And, they just reacted, just lived like normal, I would say humans are normal people living together and stuff. And we understood that they were married and, they had lived on the Baveen, their farms and stuff like that. And, it's a very interesting story with that.
Right.
Hmm.
And just, some of these things have been in Star Wars from the beginning. Like the strong female archetype is
Right.
obviously you know evident in Leia. you
Correct.
you see her getting out of her cell, and is she hiding behind Han and Luke while the blaster fire is going? No, she takes an E11 right out of Luke's hand and starts blasting herself.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah, and like a lot of girls, like myself, growing up, I like Luke is my first favorite character of all because I reason why I got into the EU was because of Luke. I wanted to see what happened with him. Is he going to live up to what he told his masters and bring the Jedi back? That's what got me into the EU. However, Leia, it was like amazing seeing this character, basically taking control and being sassy and holding her own,
hmm
and stuff. And so that was appealing. So you had appealing on all different areas of Star Wars that fit to everybody, with their likes and stuff like that and what they wanted to see. And this was in the late 70s, early 80s,
right.
way before the times.
hmm
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so that's what I love about the Mandalorian culture as well for myself is that it, again, Karen too, herself, with, just like George, they were above their, way beyond their times when developing a culture. They just went outside the box. They didn't stay inside the box whatsoever.
hmm
So, yeah. Yeah. So, and then, So, how long did it take you to research and learn Mandoa? So, since you like the Mandalorian culture, like I know that you're well versed in the language and stuff like that. How long do you think it took you to really get into the language, and are you still learning it?
I actually wouldn't say I'm well versed.
Okay. Well, to me, you are because I haven't really got into it. So some things I really can't. Like some of the gradients, I'm like, okay, that's what it is.
My
So,
friend Sombraptor can speak it better than I.
wow, nice.
He could probably, if he wanted to, have a whole conversation as much as it's not a completely full language,
Right.
but
Hmm.
there's phrases where you can string lines of
Hmm.
dialogue along if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Um, I just I'm kind of like Boba, where I know a few curses and a general greeting,
Yeah.
but not much else. I'm a little bit better than Boba actually, because I do know some of the there's a lot of words and stuff that Karen Travis
Mhm.
uses a lot in the books
Mhm.
that you do after a while. You're just like, oh, I know what Aruatai means. I don't need to go through the glossary and find the definition. Um, um, but yeah, I wouldn't call myself a fluent speaker, and
Okay.
I've messed up the pronunciation a bunch of times too, as people have called out in my video and like the comment section of my videos. But
Yeah.
I try, I guess.
And it's fine that counts and stuff, but to me, like I said, because I really didn't, I'm not really into the language part of it, although I'm fascinated by it. But
Mhm.
you have more study than I do, so that's why I'm like, okay, so like how long did it take you, and are you still progressing in it? So it's very interesting.
If I took the time to actually like there's like guides on like how to actually speak it and string words along
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Uh I I mean, I've got my Duolingo and I'm learning different languages on there, but I don't think they have Mondoa.
Oh,
If they
that's
did, I'd probably actually take an effort to learn it, but
yeah. Yeah. And then I'm just going to switch gears to a very different franchise, but because we did talk about it. So, like, we talked about like Lord of the Rings and stuff. Is that another reason what got you into it? Is that, the languages of the Elfin language and all that?
well, I got into Lord of the Rings kind of after. We
Yeah.
touched on it a little bit in the pre
Hmm.
uh, stream chat,
Yeah.
but I took a break from Star Wars in like a little bit after I graduated high school because I just didn't like the even when the EU was still canon, I wasn't a fan of the direction they were taking the EU,
Yeah.
especially with all of the Clone Wars tie-in stuff. I wasn't a fan of seeing everything I loved about the Clone Wars multimedia project get overwritten.
Yeah.
So I kind of took a break from Star Wars, and in high school, I had discovered I read The Hobbit for my British literature class, and then
Hmm.
I read The Silmarillion for a subsequent project in that same class.
Yeah.
And from there, I just fell down the rabbit hole, and now I think my Tolkien knowledge has almost surpassed my Star Wars knowledge.
There you have it. That's amazing. Like being fans of a different franchise and stuff, and seeing the world building and comparing and loving both at the same time. It's amazing stuff.
Hmm.
It is amazing stuff. So now, what is your favorite Mandalorian era? Because we know that they expand out through the time frame of Star Wars. So which era did you really take notice of the Mandalorian culture? What's your favorite era?
Well, the Old Republic era or the glory days.
Mhm.
And they do kind of come back. They do
Yeah,
kind of come back in the legacy era, but they're
yeah,
not like, they're not like they were during the Old Republic era. It would be interesting to see if there was a second Mandalorian Wars in the like happening in the legacy era, just like
hmm,
Mir Tagev just says, you know what, screw this, I'm gonna take over the galaxy.
yeah,
It'd be
yeah,
interesting to see what would happen.
yeah. Because she was. It seemed like she was being set up to like maybe step into the Mandalore.
Well, she was definitely
After the
down to
crap.
take it from Boba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that was kind of being set up for him to pass the torch around because he was already sort of dying in Legacy of the Force. Then he got cured, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like he's still very, very old.
Oh yeah.
So, and he couldn't go back to Mandalore because Jason put the nano. What was it? It was like a nanovirus.
Yeah, it was a nanovirus. Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was a nanovirus or if they were nanobots or something like that. But
yeah, nanovirus.
He couldn't go back to Mandalore, otherwise he'd die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember if they ever resolved that. In Legacy of the Force, it was kind of getting there, but I don't remember if Dala ever actually helped him.
I think by the time you get to Crucible and stuff, I think there was some resolution on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So from what I recall, that they were, resolving that issue and stuff, and that Mirta was being set up to be the next leader. Yeah. And I was so fascinated with that. I was like, okay, because she's a very fascinating character.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened with her family and with Boba and his wife and, and her mom. And so it was very interesting to see, some kind of torch passed down or whatever, and see if she still had some like hatred for her grandfather after, or if that's been resolved or what have you. So, and of course, now we can only do what ifs, so.
Unfortunately, but also kind of fortunately.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want the mouse touching that.
No.
Whatsoever. Yeah. All right. So, what did you think of Jango Fett, his character arc? So we know that that's one of the reasons why you really got into, the Mandalorians as well, and into the PT because your love of Jango Fett. So, what do you think about his character arc? And just expand on that a little more, and share anything else that you wish to share that you haven't about Jango.
Well, one of the reasons actually why I like the Clone Wars as a conflict in general is because Order 66 is not just the Sith's revenge, but it's Jango's revenge as well. Because, we had Dooku leading the Jedi on Galadran, and that basically wiped out the true Mandalorians except for him. And he goes on, becomes the prime clone of the clone army, and then all of these clones of him basically go and kill the Jedi. So it's kind of like this almost poetic sort of
justice.
Poetic justice, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because we know the history between the Mandalorians and the Jedi, so, it's kind of like, he kind of helps get some, I don't know, redemption or something. I don't know. But it's very interesting how they expanded the lore from, we knowing Boba, and then, and we knew that, he had to, he came from somewhere, he had to have parents, and then that was exposed to us that he was a clone off, and that he was his quote unquote father was the template of the clones and stuff. And it all expanded and started unraveling with the lore and how they're tied to the Mandalorians and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons why I really fell in love with Jango myself, is that we got to get more depth of who Boba is, how he came about, how Jango was a foundling, and and how he was raised and where he got to where he is in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like they take elements from Boba Fett's original backstory, because Boba Fett's backstory is basically one giant series of retcons.
Right. Right.
Because there were some sources that were saying he was a former stormtrooper that killed his superior officer. There were other sources saying that his real name was Jaster Mareel, and he came from a planet called Concord Dawn.
Mm-hmm. And
it took some of these elements and gave them to Jango's backstory, where Jaster Mareel becomes his own character instead of being an alias of Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
he's a Mandalorian that comes to Concord Dawn and helps Jango after his parents are murdered by the Death Watch.
Correct.
So, and then Jango goes on to kind of fill his place and become Manda-LORE after he dies at the Battle of Corta 6. And so, yeah, it's like this interesting, like taking all these different things and that for like Boba's backstory and then putting them, making them still be true, but for Jango.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get Boba Fett still settling on Concord Dawn with his wife at one point, to where, of course, his superior, basically rapes her, and he gets revenge on that. He takes justice into his own hands, where he gets exiled, and that's how that whole story goes. And that, Soul Assassin's comment right here just reminded me of that. And so, it still makes, where Jango or Boba comes from kind of true, because of his father being found there, living there, and then he goes and tries to be a family guy and settles back in a place of his origin. Yeah. So you could see how well they did this retcon and tied it all in.
Right. And if he didn't do it at 16 years old, maybe it would have worked.
Right. So I'm going to get to another quiz answer, and we're just going to start wrapping up here soon. So
okay.
This one goes back to Fordo. So this is a quiz question about Fordo still. What was the group called Fordo led into the headquarters of San Hill? And this is from the Clone Wars 03. So what was the headquarters, or what was the group called? Not headquarters. What was the group called Fordo led into the headquarters, of San Hill?
It was the Munilans 10, and they were only named that after the Battle of Munilans.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. So yeah, you're really well versed with your Fordo. And it's fun.
Would be concerned if I wasn't.
I know, you're like, what? Yeah. So I do that with everybody. Like when I had Matt Wilkins, he really likes Kip Duran, so I threw out a lot of Kip Duran quiz questions out there too.
I'm just flashing back to Fate of the Jedi, when basically anytime Kip Duran speaks, they're just like, "Shut up, Kip! You killed Carida."
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So what do you think of the new Jedi Order Luke created versus the old order? So a little bit switch up here from the Mandalorians, and we'll go back.
It's obviously better than the old Jedi Order. Well, Luke kind of like took some of the principles of the Jedi Order before Yoda's time,
right.
with like, for example, the Jedi Order during like Nomi Sunrider and Ula Keldroma, they were able to marry, and it was a little bit more free than the stringent prequel era Jedi.
Yeah.
And obviously they kind of had to, but they take people of all ages, not just babies.
Yeah.
And, they still kind of encourage, like, being away from attachment, but but they recognize that you can still, like, love and feel for people without being attached.
Yeah. Yeah, what Luke basically shared, or what that shared for the New Order, is that not getting lost in grief and losing yourself in grief if someone dies, that you're like your wife or your child or whatever, are not trying to possess them to where, like how Anakin did and was trying to find ways to save, quote unquote, save Padme, so not losing yourself. That's what that attachment means, is like not losing yourself and allowing, even though it's going to hurt, allowing for the Force to have its way, basically, let the Force act on them and stuff. Yeah. So I love that direction that was taken. And I think in a way, and, I've debated with people upon this, on social media, that was kind of the point George was making with the PT, was attachment was not being able to let go, versus like the possession and stuff like that. But, some people are like, no, George didn't like attachment whatsoever. So, this Luke that, with this new Jedi Order doesn't make sense, and he didn't want it. And I'm like, well, he approved it. It wouldn't have happened if he didn't want it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's what I don't, like I said, people don't realize how much George had to say, especially with his movie characters. when it came to the lore. Even maybe he might have went a different direction. Who knows? He says things, then he contradicts himself. But the proof is in the pudding, in his actions on how the lore went is how he wanted it to go.
I kind of have my view of George Lucas is he's the typical artist that's never happy with his work.
Yeah, I get it. I get there sometimes. Like I had like that Asajj Ventress painting that you seen. I was like, I had eventually like, I think I'm done. I better step back because I'm going to do something that I'm not going to like, so
Yeah.
and we see that, with George with the OT when he came out with his special editions,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And I know some of it was just because there was things he wanted to do that he couldn't do. But then there was just things like, did we need the Ewoks to blink?
Yeah. I know, so they're constantly staring at you.
Like, I never noticed that Ewoks didn't blink until they made the special editions where Ewoks blink.
Yeah. I know. Go back to your if you have old copies of just the originals and then comparing them. Oh my God.
I stopped getting the special editions after 2004. I'm like, I like this.
Yeah, I'll stick with one and just that's it. Yeah. Let's see here. Soul Assassin says, geez, artist, am I right? Yeah. That's artists. We're never satisfied. So at one point we just got to step back and say, it's done. Even if I feel it's not done, it's done.
That's how I feel with my videos sometimes. I made a list of ones I want to go back and redo, but I'm like, do I really need to redo them?
Yeah.
But my format keeps evolving, and I'm trying to make things more visually, auditorially, if that's a word, appealing.
Yeah. Auditorial. It's now a word.
But I'm constantly updating my format and finding things that work, getting rid of things that don't work. So when I go back and watch some of my old videos, I'm like, ugh, I want to go freaking go back and redo that video. Or like, oh, why is this my most popular video? It's garbage.
I know, it's amazing how what people catch on and they think is like really, really good, and you're like, I could have done better.
It's never the video that you expect to get a million views gets a million views.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And we're like our own artists, because producing and editing videos is an art form as well. Like graphic and video design is arts. So it's amazing what people see and think and like compared to what you really think they should like. It's very crazy how that happens, how that plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have open airlock policy at 1150 super chat. Thank you so much. I checked out the channel and it appears to be pure. So I'm guessing he went and checked out your channel and loves the content.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, he's one of our, we have a thing called EU elitists because that's what we've been called lately because we just love George Lucas era, especially the EU. So we're EU elitists. So you might fit into that too with us.
I don't call myself an elitist, but I often say that I live under my EU rock and I like it under here.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. And we it's like something that was like stereotyped towards some of us, I guess you can say. So we just play with it and just, like, okay, that's what you want to say, sure. We'll own the word so it stops being negatively, used towards us. Because when you start using owning the word and you put it into a more positive spin, it no longer has any power, like negative power.
True.
Yeah.
I don't know. The world is scary outside. I like it here underneath my rock. Nobody knows I'm under here. I don't know about anybody outside. It's great.
Just put on your Mandalorian armor and just go out there and just be a badass. Just be a badass. So Jackson says, I don't think Travis had a grudge. She just didn't think the true warriors should be dependent or immutable. Yeah. Characters like the Force sensitivity. He must be responding to someone else right there. I clicked on.
Well, I did kind of hint that Travis has a Jedi hate thing, but which I don't know. I can see where the critics come from. I still love Karen Travis. she's like the one author I'd want to meet if I could.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
And you know what? I've been in conversations where people hate her because of this anti-Jedi sentiment that she does.
mhm.
But for me, like getting into the Mandalorian culture and getting into the history and how they, in history they interacted with each other and stuff, and then going into the clones and being, of course, a template off of Jango and how they got trained through Cal Scarata and like Wallen Bow and all them. Yeah, there's going to be that anti-Jedi stuff going on that may have carried on from Django, because I
Mhm.
don't think like some of that was genetically altered out.
Well, the Mandalorians themselves also,
Mm-hmm.
well, because they had Mandalorian training sergeants, and
Correct.
historically, the Mandalorians and the Jedi have never really gotten along. There's been
Right.
times when they have fought alongside each other, like in SWOTOR. I
Mm-hmm.
had never played the MMO because I A, don't have time to devote to MMOs, and B, I just can't find an MMO that can actually capture my interest.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
but
fair.
I believe in one of the missions or one of the storylines, like the Jedi and the Mandalorians work together,
Mm-hmm. And they
and
did some too in New Jedi Order. Like eventually, Fett and all them
oh,
eventually.
true.
Yeah.
But I'm for this purpose, I'm talking about like old Republic
Correct.
era, um, and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
but stopping at the prequel era because we're talking about the clones and
Yeah.
possible uh, anti-Jedi sentiments. But
Mm-hmm.
you had the new Sith Wars where the Mandalorians were basically kind of slaves under um, both the Sith, and they were defeated by the Jedi because
Mm-hmm.
Kay Keldroma. They just don't like, and you can see like how they don't like Force users in general.
Correct. Yes. They
And
didn't
it
really have respect for Sith either, but they
no
used
no
them sometimes too. So it's like how Sidious used aliens, like Thrawn, for example, because there was a purpose to them. So
right.
there's that sometimes there's that tolerance.
Well, Thrawn, I think, was the exception to the rule because
Exactly.
uh, Sidious was very xenophobic, and then here comes
Hmm.
this Chiss commander that just
Yeah.
completely obliterated his task force.
Right. Yeah.
And he meets him, and he's like, "Whoa, this guy's way smarter than me. I need him on my side."
Exactly. And so there's like those exception to the rules, and that can even go with Mandalorians and who they may tolerate at the time for the convenience, I guess you can say.
Mhm.
And Mandalorians are brutal.
Right.
Yeah. And so
And
they'll use something for the time being, and then after that they're like, piss on you. We're going back to our old ways again, and F you for this and that kind of deal. So
right, but there's a historical precedence where
yes.
there's lots of historical conflicts they've been fighting against the Jedi, whether they're allied with the Sith or not.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, that's really interesting, like looking at the history of the Jedi, Mandalorian, and all that culture there. um so going into Mandalorian some more, we know that at one point there was like the Mandalorian helmet that basically was the ruler's helmet, and over time that kind of faded into oblivion. And then we get into to the dark saber that was only TCW and stuff. So how did that, like, how did you perceive that? I know you don't care much for the Mandalorian culture during that time frame, but what are your thoughts on that?
well, it's evident from watching my channel that I ignore TCW stuff.
Yeah,
I view that as part of
ignoring
the,
now.
like there's, and I'm not gonna poo poo on it. Like there's parts of
Yeah.
TCW that I like and
Oh
parts I
yeah.
don't like. But I generally ignore that stuff. The natural progression of things, it wouldn't make sense for the dark saber to
Yeah.
actually exist with the Mandalorians because
Yeah.
the whole thing with Mandalore's mask
Hmm.
is the past couple Mandalores that wore the mask ended up not being the greatest and almost
Right.
driving the Mandalorians to extinction. Mandalore the Indomitable and then
Right.
Mandalore the Ultimate, both
Hmm.
kind of, well, Mandalore the Ultimate was infinitely better than Mandalore the Indomitable, but he still almost led the Mandalorians to ruin.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think having it end with Candra's Ordo basically being like, all right, I'm the Mandalore now, but we're going to get rid of Mandalore's mask, because it brings in opportunities for weak leaders to cheat their way into getting the mask.
Right. And
And from then on, the Mandalorians choose based on merit. Like, oh, okay, well, this clan leader here, she's done good in battle. She's never had like you know, uh, bad tactical decision. She is generally liked by the rest of the clans. Let's make her Mandalore. And that's how they kind of choose their Mandalore from then. So to go back from that and say, okay, I created this black lightsaber. Anybody who has the talking stick gets to be Mandalore. That invites that just brings the whole same problem with Mandalore's mask, where it invites all of this potential for weak leaders. And then you get to a point where Darth Maul has the magic talking stick, and he's like, look at me, I am the Mandalore now. And and they just have to blindly follow him, when culturally the Mandalorians, as we were discussing earlier, are extremely distrustful of Force users and would never just bow down to one just because, he had the magic stick or the magic mask.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, because we're talking about Jedi relationship with the Mandalorians and stuff. And with that, and I love the progression of how the ruling mask, I like to call it, was eventually just like, basically thrown out of existence because of the weakness of the line that it kept on going down to and stuff. And then now it being like going to basically the one that can stand up and get everybody involved if needed, as the ruler of the Mandalore. And another arc I like too is when Finn Shisa, was dying, and Boba Fett, had to basically put him out of his misery. And then, Boba Fett, promised that he would, step up in his place. And, and he did it, even though he's like, I'm not really versed as a Mandalorian, but I will do what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, looking back at that and all the history and stuff, and looking at, like how the Mandalorians needed to stay a very strong culture of, beings and stuff, it makes sense with the progression of the mask and how it went. So when the Darksaber came about, and looking at the Jedi and the relationship with the Mandalorians and stuff, it just didn't make sense and stuff. So knowing that you're really into the Mandalorian culture, I just wanted to get your opinion on that, not to stir up any like this anti-sentiment towards TCW and stuff like that. So.
Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah, so that's not the point here. So, and I'm gonna have one more question. We're gonna start wrapping up here.
Okay.
Maybe two. Tell me what you think, because I know you did that history video about like how the Mandalorians were created by Karen Travis and how it looked, you can look into our human species, like different cultures and how they tie in. So do you think she was influenced by George Lucas and how he was inspired by different cultures and mythos to, to create Star Wars? Do you think she may have been, influenced by him to create the Mandalorian culture?
Well, I think she had a lot of different influences where just from real life. I don't know her background, if she was ever interested in like history, and I actually wanted to in the video, I believe I explained I wanted to reach out to her, but I was too nervous because I wanted to there's not really much etymology of where she got like the Mandoa language from, what she based it on. And because it's weird, like parts of it seem like almost Germanic or Scandinavian, but then like there's like things that they do where it's like, oh, that's very like Spanish or Portuguese, like they do that a lot in that language. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should email her, and I just never did it because I was a fear of rejection, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, you should do it anyways, because that would be a wonderful video to see you put up. Is like, part two of your, your historical accounts on, Mandalorian, and how it looks like it reflects some of the cultures of our reality.
True, and actually, there was a lot of things in that video that I neglected. Like,
Mhm.
I do believe she was influenced a little bit by Tamara Morrison's Maori culture,
Okay.
especially with one of the war chants, the Da Werda Verda, where it's
Okay.
typically performed before battle, much like the Maori Haka dance,
Yeah.
and um, like it's kind of like a dance too, not at the
Mhm.
same degree as the Haka, where there's specific moves and stuff you got to do, but like
Yeah.
uh if the person next to you messed up the verse, you were uh not only liable, you're not only like encouraged, well, not only could you, but you were also encouraged to knock them out
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
messed up the verse, and then they'd have to get back up and start singing in lockstep again.
Yeah.
um,
Just imagine that though, being a part of that culture and you mess up on like your ceremonial line and someone decks you for it.
right.
That's amazing. We know that Karen too is, she has military influence, and we can see that with the Mandalorians and the Clone Wars, the
Yeah.
clones and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I don't remember if it's in the foreword or where I read it, but she interviewed a lot of like SAS people and like
Hmm.
other sort of special forces guys, and they would like help her with like maintaining the accuracy of what like how a special forces operation would actually go down when she
Hmm.
was writing these characters and putting them into situations.
Hmm.
Um, whether she was influenced by George or not, other than the universe that it is set in, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Because if we take a look at George Lucas's influence, he was very influenced by mythology,
Hmm.
by stories, and like Lord of the Rings, like the Greek mythology. He had a little bit of like some inspiration from history, but like
Right.
rudimental history.
Hmm.
Like he grew up, uh I think he was born at like the tail end of World War II, so he grew up, reading like Captain America comics with about like, him punching out Hitler and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
like, and you see the parallels between the Galactic Empire and Germany and so on and so forth. But I don't really think they have the same influences, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, yeah. I just figured like maybe, like, oh,
Oh, maybe,
sometimes an
but
author, would look at, the creator that they get to expand out from and see, oh well, he used, like the Jedi, like Jedi culture was, influenced by, these Asian type cultures and so on and so forth. So, just like being inspired a little bit of like looking into other cultures to bring and draw them in. Because we know George, drew in from different areas like
mhm,
political realms where he was inspired by. He brought that in and made themes and all that stuff, including other cultures, and brought that in to develop other species or the Jedi or what have you.
mhm.
So it's very interesting with this woman, and I encourage you to reach out to her, do a part two to your history part.
We'll see.
Chat, keep on encouraging him. I drop a line in his chats all the time. Did you contact Karen Travis? Just keep on
Uh,
bugging, but just to have a part two of that would be
yeah.
very interesting. It would be really nice to see, like, even if it's a reply through email, and
Mhm.
you don't bring her on or whatever, and you do a part two to the history portion of that on what you did on influences, historical influences. That would be very, very interesting to see.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then, so staying with now, before we start closing out, staying with the Mandalorian culture, go ahead and describe your armor and the colors of the Mandalorian armor and what they mean. For those who may not have heard you say it before.
So, my armor is actually based off of a OC that somebody drew for me. I hadn't developed it. Um, I ended up kind of taking that as a basis and then
Hmm.
uh, moving on with my own thing. but I kind of kept the same color scheme that he had. And in the Mandalorian culture, orange is like it means like a lust for life. Like you really want to like go out there and experience things and go on adventures. Um, the red trim, that's usually for like honoring a parent or a parent figure. And I've if people who are new to my channel, I created a whole I did a video where I kind of went on Tad's Fenn backstory and kind of explained that a little bit. And so he has a father figure that was killed in battle, and that's why he has that on his armor. And then black is usually for vengeance, but that's not really like his armor color. That's just his just undersuit. But that's like I did that to make the colors kind of pop out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no typical white or gray. I agree.
Right.
It looks better with the black.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just love how you use the Mandalorian like culture colors, what they mean for the armor. Because we know Mandalorian's armors like are very colorful, but there's a lot of meaning to that. So really, really well done. So I admire that as well, and how much you took your persona and created a whole new persona for specifically for yourself, but also for your channel and stuff.
Right.
So yeah. So I really love that. And again, like I said earlier to you, that you're one of the channels that I went back and watched during the time when they decided to say, oh yeah, the EU's not canon anymore, kind of deal. And so you kind of helped kept my passion, for the EU alive.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to, just interview you and just let the people know you, like how you really got into Star Wars and what makes you tick with Star Wars and what have you. Guys don't talk about TCW with him though. Hey, no.
I mean, it's fine, but don't expect me to be foaming at the mouth and go on a rant. Like people have this.
I did that already.
Not even that, but people have this misconception that I like hate the show and that I hate everybody who likes the show, and that just hate. I'm just a giant hater, toxic, and whatever. And it's like that's not me. You're getting the complete wrong impression.
Yeah, and I got what you did with your videos, and like, this is why it doesn't fit, and it's perfectly fine. I'm the kind of person that compares and contrasts, and that's what you did in the video. You're like showing like where it doesn't fit and stuff like that, and that's okay to break it down. It doesn't mean hate. It just means that you're being real about the situation. Yeah,
I noticed something and I said something and people didn't like it, and that's fine, whatever. But
yeah.
I had my 2 cents. You don't need to, think I'm gonna like go off on you. Like people can enjoy things. I get that. You're allowed to enjoy things.
Yes, exactly. So, all right. So what do you have coming up for your channel within the week, and anything new coming out for your channel?
Well, I'm trying to get this next video finished in the next couple weeks. It's the next part of my timeline series. We're finally getting on to the Rebellion era, and it's taken me so long to research and compile it because it's just really oversaturated with material, and I wanted to go back and read and listen and watch some of that material so I could get a better sense of like what actually happened.
Okay. Yeah, so you guys stay tuned within sometime soon, part 8 of your timeline history will be coming out.
Yeah.
So you guys stay tuned and go subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to his channel yet, go ahead and find yourself over there after we're done here and subscribe, and stay up to date on material coming out. Like I said, it's well worth your watch, and his production is really, really well. His purpose for his channel, it really shines through. And then, so thank you for coming in and allow me to interview you on my channel, and, for continuing the love of the EU.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And, hopefully we stay in touch and so on, because I like to create a community where we stay in touch. We share what we like, all of that, because it just strengthens the EU and helps keep it in front of everybody.
Right. Oh, no, that's cool. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much as well. And thank you, chat, for tuning in. And as for me, this Thursday's coffee chat, I'm thinking about reviewing Darth, what's his name? Darth Angelus's last two Heir to the Empire fan shows. So doing that and then talking about the political, political time, political era during that time of, Heir to the Empire or Thrawn trilogy, and just going, talk about that lore within that time frame. So that's what I plan on doing for Talking EU. So you guys stay tuned. That's Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I think that's all I have going on for now. And stay tuned for the next scheduled Talking EU. I'm in process with bringing another person in, and that will be announced here shortly on my Twitter, YouTube community as well. So thank you again, Tad, for joining me and allowing me to interview you. It was a wonderful conversation to be in with you.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And chat, thank you so much as well. And may the force be with you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
I had fought the worst of all wars and witnessed the redemption of evil. I have seen balance restored to the Force. But order can turn to chaos, as it did when I was born. Now, with my loved ones and my loyal allies, I face a new challenge unlike any before. And I'm not sure this time we can win.
Star Wars Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore, the first novel of the new Jedi Order.
Another happy landing.